Hello and welcome to a very special week here on Pondering Papaya as we take you behind the scenes of the McLaren team. Each day we're going to be bringing you an interview of someone who's either worked for the team or has a very special connection to it, and they'll give you a fascinating insight into what life at the MTC is like. To kick the week off, we are revisiting some of our previous interviews that older listeners may already have heard, but fear not, as there'll be 2 brand new episodes on Thursday and Friday. On today's episode, we're going to be taking a behind-the-scenes look at McLaren's heritage team. With McLaren arguably the team on the grid that's most proud of their history, you're going to be hearing from 3 of the people who help ensure the cars look as good as they did when they were racing. Now, fair warning, these interviews were recorded behind the scenes at the Goodwood Festival, so you may hear some loud cars in the background, but hopefully you can still make out what our guests have to say. First up, we're going to be hearing from Gary Wheeler, who's a build technician at the heritage team and also was a former mechanic to Ayrton Senna. Enjoy.
I know you had a very special relation with Ayrton Senna, sort of talk about that a little bit. I mean, I was doing some research and I read that he had a particular request, didn't he, when he joined the team, and it involved you, didn't it?
It did. It's fortunate this weekend that Emerson's driving his car, because the first Formula One team I worked for was for Emerson in 1982, and Chico Serra was the driver, and Chico used to bring in a very young Ayrton when he was doing Formula 4 2000 and Formula 3 into the workshop, and Ayrton would get in the Formula 1 cars and sort of, and you could see he was quite a serious young man from the word go, but we got to know him quite well, and I got to know him very well actually, and he was always in the workshop in between racing and stuff, and you could see he was a talent, he was winning all the time. And then as the years went by, Ayrton came into Formula 1 in 1984, and I came to McLaren's in 1984, and we were testing in the pit road or something in Brazil, and he said, "Oh, I see you at McLaren's now," and I said, "Yeah," I said, "If you ever come to McLaren's, make sure that I'm on your car," and he said, "I'll do my best," and then he did ask when he signed up, and and it was quite but the last thing he did, he just asked, and they worked out that I did stay on his car. So,
what was your first impressions of him like then, sort of back then? When you first met him, how did he come across?
Very dedicated, very serious, but you could tell that this guy was a talent. And I personally think it doesn't matter what era he would have been born in, he was still going to be one of the fastest driver, because to this day he is still the fastest driver I have ever worked for. The speed he could make those cars go is incredible.
You're lucky enough to work with, you're saying you've been at McLaren 40 years, you've worked with a lot of good drivers, sort of, other than Senna, who is it that stands out? You obviously worked with Hamilton and things like that. Is there another driver that, when they came in, you could tell they were quick straight away, you thought they're going to be a star?
Yeah, Mika, obviously, he was quick from the word go, and when I first joined, it was between Niki Lauda and Alan Prost, and they were the 2 front runners, and you couldn't have had 2 better drivers in the team at that time. In fact, the championship was between those 2 in '84, and McLaren's were going to win it. It was just which driver was going to win it, and it's an incredible situation to be in, and it went right down to the last race, and it was amazing, working on people like Niki Lauda and how they approach their winning mindset compared to how Alan Prost approaches his winning mindset, because that's all they want to do is win. They're not interested in coming 3rd, 4th, or 5th. They are just winning people.
And what was the different mindsets like? I've always read that Senna was very meticulous. He would jump out the car and probably give you a big long list of things he wanted changing. What were the other drivers like? What was Lauda like when he was driving? What was Prost like?
Yeah, Niki was a no-nonsense person. You could never pull the wool over his eyes. He knew what was required to make that car go quicker, and it was, and the same with Alan Prost. they did a lot of setup work. So the bit they put in was the very last little bit. They tried to make the car do it for them, you know. So, but they're amazing people. They're real talent. They're very talented.
What was Lewis like then? Obviously, when he came in, he was very young. It seems a long time ago now. But yeah, what was sort of your first impressions of him?
The difference is that these guys like Lewis have been racing from the word go, you know, whereas a lot of the other guys didn't start driving or doing karting or anything until a lot later on. But you know, Lewis was thrown in a car, and he was obviously just a natural talent, and was quick right from the word go. And he'd been doing it all his life before he even got into Formula One. Probably like Max as well, and all these guys, they're already hit the ground running by the time they get in a Grand Prix car. So unlike days gone by, you know.
Yeah, when there's a lot more build-up.
Yeah.
What about the team then? Because obviously you've been there for a long time. Like, how has the team evolved? Because obviously we all know how it started with Bruce and that lot, sort of a very family-run thing. And now, I mean, we're looking around. It's McLaren's everywhere. Like, how has it been for you? Your experience with the team and like how it's evolved over the years?
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. It's all the dedication. You know that Bruce. There's a lot of the benchmarks and foundations that Bruce put in, obviously before my time. But when I've worked with the guys that work with Bruce, and his ethos and his approach to doing things still carries out to this day. And you know, the standards have always been high at McLaren's. That's a Ron Dennis thing. He put that in, and that benchmark is still there. Even in the bad times when the car hasn't been at the front of the grid, we've always made sure we always look good, and we always have done. And when the success starts to come back, now Zach's in charge, and he's got all the right people in the right places, and it's all coming good, you know. It starts to snowball, and you've only got to see that like at the British Grand Prix now. I've never seen so many people wearing orange ever, you know, compared to before. So this team's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and success brings that, you know. So
I think one part of the popularity, I think, is I maybe like McLaren seem to do more with their heritage than any other team really. Like obviously the factory's set up that way. We have events like this. Sort of, you're involved in that now. Like, how important is the heritage side to McLaren, away from the modern racing, but also showcasing where the teams come from and sort of the cars they've built?
yeah, I mean, it is hugely important, and the advantage we have is that we do have a long heritage, you know, a massive heritage. Not Red Bull, you know, they've only got 20 years of a car that looks very similar. You know, Mercedes, you know, it's very difficult to pick out their cars, what year it is. But with McLaren's, you know, when Bruce was doing Can-Am, IndyCar racing to pay for the Formula One side, and it goes way back. I mean, we've got huge heritage, and it should be kept going, you know, and Zach's bought that, he loves all that, and he got Indy to, you know, build up this heritage team, and it's growing and growing, and you know, now it's amalgamated with peers. You have to get somebody else to do it, yeah, and it's it's all, you know, it's the best thing ever to see these cars come back to life and run again, you know, is amazing, and that's thanks to people like Zach and all the people that run it.
So what's the main challenges then with sort of keeping these cars up to date? Like, is there a particular difficult? I mean, I'm sure there's loads of challenges you face in the job. Sort of, what does it involve over the years?
The main challenge is time, really. We've got so many cars, and we don't have enough time to run them all. So it's quite important that you find out what anniversaries are for that year, and what cars need to be, you know, rebuilt and maintained that we're going to use for that year as soon as we can. You know, but because we can't run them all at the same time or do them all at the same time. But you know, we've got a great team that organise what cars are coming in and coming out, and then we can maintain them. But yeah, it's some of the parts we lack as well. But we've always got the drawings, so we'll always get them made. Sometimes you just have to wait a little bit. But it's a challenge, but it's fantastic when you finally see a car that hasn't moved the wheel for 20, 30 years, run around the track again is fantastic.
And then this year in particular must be especially poignant for you, obviously, with Ayrton's sad death 30 years ago. Like, how nice has it been to work on some of his cars again, obviously back in the day?
It is, and it's very, and what makes that special is that Bruno drives most of them, because when I was with Ayrton, Bruno was only small, and we'd put him in the car and that, and now he's driving his uncle's cars, and it brings back lots of memories, lots of happy memories and success, and I love it. All the Santa cars are special to me, and all the races, because he was so successful, and it's very magical.
It's a hard question. I mean, I heard Christian Horner got asked it earlier, and he only has 20 cars to choose from. But if you had to pick one car that is your favourite, maybe throughout your time or throughout the history of McLaren, is there one in particular that you've always loved and sort of that's been your one?
Well, they're all special, but for its sheer success, I'd always probably pick the MP44, because we were so dominant, and it was just between Prost and Senna, and it was so quick and so successful. To be part of that was very magical.
I agree with you on that, so yeah, thank you very much.
Next up is Rob Garofal, who with the title of Heritage Test Driver surely has the best job in the world, and that's exactly the question I asked him.
I mean, that was my first question, is as McLaren's Heritage Test Driver, have you got the best job in the world?
Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. There's no way to even sort of hide away from it or try and be modest. It's fantastic.
How did you get into it then? How does one become a Heritage Test Driver?
You know what, like a lot of things in life, it's purely by luck. And I can tell you the story if you've got a couple of seconds. So I worked for Automotive as a pro driver, and we happened to have the 720S at Carfest at Jody Schechter's farm. And the M23 was due to run there as well. But I think the Oliver Turvey, I think, was due to drive it on the Friday. He couldn't make it. I was there, and long and the short of it is I got asked if I could drive it, which was great, and so I did. And I think at the start of the day, Indy, who runs Heritage, was a bit nervous because he had no idea who I am, quite rightly. And was very unsure, but we had a great day, and by the end of the day, we kind of found that we were both getting on quite well, and the car ran well, and that was it. And a couple of weeks later, Indy just gave me a call and said, look, we need someone to shake some cars down here and there. Is it something you'd be interested in? And that was, I think, 7 or 8 years ago and 91 cars ago. So purely by chance, but yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Well, 91 cars, like you said, like, sort of what's the role involved other than the driving? Because obviously you must give a lot of feedback and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think now that I've driven an awful lot of the cars, I've got quite a good understanding of when they're correct, when they're not, and so it's the ability, especially with cars that have just had complete restorations or rebuilds, to jump in them and just give feedback on whether they're correct, whether they're driving right, whether the clutch needs bleeding, the brakes need bleeding, the car's tracking straight. It's not performance at all. It's just running through the motions with the cars and making sure that they're good, whether that's for the McLaren collection, whether it's for demos, or whether it's for customer cars that have been sold. That's basically the role, and it's developed a little bit over time, doing more demos and things as well. But
I mean, one question that's always very interesting asking race driver, is it easier to drive in their era or another era? And you're probably the best person to answer that, because you've driven cars across the eras. Like, we think of the cars today, so different to the ones we saw just behind us or the ones earlier in the year. Like, in your opinion, like, are they easier to drive? But you've got the computer side as well, haven't you?
They're very different. I mean, obviously, so I think it's very difficult to compare a driver from, say, like Senna in the 90s or Lando today. Whereas Ayrton would have been driving with 3 pedals and heel and toe and one hand on the steering wheel, one hand on the gear lever. We've all seen the in-car footage where he's wrestling around Monaco. So that's a skill set on its own, whereas the modern drivers have got to learn the steering wheel, understand all of the settings on the steering wheel, and make adjustments while they're driving these cars at incredible speeds. So I think the general feel of the racing driver, you know, the driving through your seat of the pants, that feel, that understanding of the balance of the car is probably the same for the two areas, but it's just very different set of skills required for the two periods. So I don't think you can say one's better, one's harder. They're just very different.
Do you have a particular favourite car you've driven? I know that's a very hard question, but I mean, of the 91, was there a lap maybe that you loved?
So this is a question I get asked quite a lot, because having driven pretty much everything from the 60s through to the 2013 MP428, nothing in the hybrid period, so up to the hybrid period. I've been very lucky. I've driven, you know, the Honda V10, V12, the Tag Turbo, the DFV, the Mercedes V10, the Mercedes V8, and then all of the different chassis as well. So it is a question I get asked a lot, and the answer is probably Lewis's 2008 championship winning car, which had all of the aero on it, and the car is incredible to drive with the downforce. It's just so good. And the proportions of the car for me are great. It's not too big. It's, you know, the current cars I think look quite big. That car, the proportions, the look is amazing. But we'll take the V8 engine out of it. We'll put the V10 in it from 2005 when they were nearly 20,000 RPM and it feels like you've got a bomb strapped to you. And we'll put it in the red and white livery.
I mean, that sounds like an absolute perfect car, doesn't it?
There we go.
I mean, that sounds like an absolute perfect car, doesn't it? On drivers, like you mentioned, like Lewis, like, I mean, you'll have a good idea of this. Like, I know you said it's difficult to compare cars, but do you think great drivers are great regardless of when they drive? So if you took Senna out and put him in Landa's car this weekend, 100%. Do you think he's amazing then?
Absolutely. If you take Ayrton, you know, at late 20s, and you say, so, you know, the same fitness levels, everything else, you take him out of that car and you bring him here today and put him in Lando's car, I think he'd be absolutely straight there.
And I mean, I touched on your colleague Gary, but it seems McLaren more than any other team like to show off their history, don't they? Like, it's amazing to see them here today. Just what's it like for you, sort of being a part of that and letting fans be able to see the old cars, the old Sennas and things like that?
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, as you say, it's a huge privilege to drive them, but to share them with all the McLaren fans, because, you know, I'm 52 years old, so my era was Senna and Mansell, and so to have these cars still running and see the people, you know, loving the fact that they're out there, hearing the sound from them and engaging with the team, it's brilliant.
And I mean, Goodwood in itself must be similar for that, isn't it? Because you've got not just McLaren, but you've got Mercedes and all that. Like, does it show that the love of F1 and motorsport is probably stronger than it's ever been?
Oh, without a doubt. And I'm sure that's in part due to Netflix and that's created a much bigger fan base. But to bring the fans here where they can get close to the cars, close to the guys that work on them, talk to everybody and interact with the team, it's a fantastic occasion.
And I guess final question, you said you haven't driven the hybrid ones, but if there was one car you could drive for the last 10 years from McLaren era, sort of when would you choose? Maybe even today is how quick it is.
I think probably the last of the V10s, sort of 2005. The cars look fantastic, the engine's amazing. And yeah, I mean that's probably the car. If I had to choose one, that would be it. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thanks for having a chat with us. It's been great.
Absolutely, no problem. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Finally, you're going to be hearing from Indy Law, who can perhaps best be described as the Andres Stella of the Heritage team. Indy runs the operation and has done so for decades, so it's no surprise when Gary's final words to me were that Indy was a legend. You've just been described to me as a legend, which is probably quite a big build-up. But let's start with your job first. I mean, Heritage Events Manager.
Yeah.
What does that involve? Let's break that down.
So basically means once we've sort of honed into an event that we would like to do as a company, as a business, sponsors, partners, whatever it may be, even Goodwood for instance, I then plan all of it. We agree on number of cars, number of drivers, days, etc., and then the planning is down to me. Meet with the organisers, meet if we needed to go and do a recce somewhere, go and do a recce, and then from that point on, it's down to me to make it happen.
I've read you run the Heritage team like a racing team. Sort of, what goes on the day to day? Maybe not when you're at events. Sort of, how do you keep a Heritage team running? Really?
Well, I think it helps having the right type of people. We've got a good balance of mature, experienced guys, and then we've got some youngsters also. And the interesting thing I find with the youngsters is they actually want to stay here because of the variety of cars that they're dealing on a daily basis with. Lots of history, obviously, connected to it, as opposed to wanting to go racing. Racing for its own reasons, a mechanic is specific to a part of the car for efficiency, speed, whatever it may be, which is very different to how we operate in the Heritage. We generally try and bring them all along at the same level, give them a project, i.e. give them a car, they strip it down fully to refurbish it all. So that's a fulfillment in many aspects, not just for them personally, but for me also, because we're all there to give them any guidance, any buffer, or information that they need, we can get it. But to actually see them growing, and then to eventually run a car also having completely refurbished it, is really special, really special.
And what are the challenges of keeping? I mean, we've got some cars here that are 20, 30 years old. What are the main challenges of keeping that running?
They are tricky. I mean, the Cosworth side of type of an engine is relatively easy. In terms of electronically, it's not so complicated, and mechanically, it's really quite sound also. So I think that's an easy one. The more more technical ones, when we, for instance, go to a Honda type of engine, then it becomes more complicated. Go a step further, Mercedes engines, but then obviously the specialist Mercedes guys, technicians, systems guys, they come and support us. So we're fairly covered in that aspect of it. In terms of the car, gearboxes, suspension, wiring, anything like this, of course we've got all the data. So it's all to hand. Early 80s I would say, and prior that it's slightly harder. In some cases you've got to wake up the grey cells. But generally speaking, we've got all the data available to us.
And is this the best team to work for in that department? Because obviously you have got a red team down the road, but they only sort of did F1 cars mainly, whereas McLaren have such a wide-ranging history. Like, is that an enjoyable part for you? And is this the best team to work for in that department? Because obviously you have got a red team down the road, but they only sort of did F1 cars mainly, whereas McLaren have such a wide-ranging history. Like, is that an enjoyable part for you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously success on track helps, not just motivate, but helps the product, doesn't it? Genuine hand on heart, I would say, I think we're probably the most popular team right now. Fantastic job by Zach and his team. Everyone that's here pushing Papaya, not just to sell it, but actually engage people. It's there for you to buy into it if you want to, and it's endless. For us, I think I enjoy what I'm doing now. I was very fortunate to have come into it when I did. Had some remarkable racing experiences, achieved masses. So all of that would be wasted if I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. And to pass that and encourage the next generations coming through, this is what it's about. This week we're celebrating Gary's 40th. I'm 1 year behind, and it's there for them to see. It is a fantastic company to work for. It's hard work, there's no question of it, but then that's what it is, that's what it takes. We're prepared to do that. This is our third week on the trot, so it is telling, particularly when you're a certain age, it starts telling, but we're doing it because we enjoy it, we love it.
And what's Zach been like? I mean, you can hear him in interviews, he clearly absolutely loves his cars. Like, what's he been like to work with since he came to the team?
Before Zach, we had various people in the very high level of management, and Heritage has been started, stopped. the pandemic, to a degree, was a pivotal point. Just before that, we got shifted out of NTC and into Unit 2. And we were like the lost souls, to a degree, you would say. But what it did do was it gave us an incentive. It gave us motivation, because this is our department. We've got to make it work. Particularly when the pandemic hit, believing we were going to be the first department to get laid off. But I spoke with the management. We're on our own. We're not interfering with anybody in a bigger picture, MTC. We want to carry on, which we did. And then, just got rolling from that point on. We sold some cars to customers. Customers were super happy. And then the engagement with doing some events, everything just went bounding down, really, to a point where we are now. We've moved back to MTC. I think we're a big hit, thanks to Zach, who loves history, loves heritage, backed by peers who's probably not very far behind Zach in those terms. So really, it's been great support for us going forward. It's demanding. I think this year we'll probably have about 23 events, be it shakedowns, private events like this and so forth. So that's a lot. That's a lot.
Is there a particular item in your collection that you really like? I mean, I think I was reading that you've even got some of Lewis Hamilton's old karts. Like, is there anything really special for you in that you've got back in the warehouse, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of cars there, chassis there, which are race-winning pedigree. There isn't any one that you would say is a championship winning car, because that's played a part through the season, any one chassis. So you can talk about the Indy car, which has won the 500 50 years ago, Emerson in that car, which has won numerous races, and the championship rightly. But for me, I think my era was red and whites. There were some poor red and whites, but equally there were some, really dominating red and whites. And it would be easy to say, let's pick MP44, won 15 out of 16 races. But for me, I think the prettiest car would be a 5B or a 6, for its such clean lines and so forth, and a real racing car look to it. The 44 is obviously a step ahead, but not as pretty in my own mind.
Talk us a little bit about the cars we've got here today, sort of what makes each of them special, and I mean, how good it's been for fans to see them out on the track.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the true race fans, bobble hats, whatever you wish to call them, I mean, that's as unique as you get with the 3 running cars that we have in the tents now. Obviously, starting off with the Indy car from 1974, Johnny Rutherford won not just the 500 at Indianapolis, but he won Pocono, and I can't remember what the other 200 race was. I mean, it's phenomenal when you look at the concept of the car to a more modern car. They were gladiators, that's all they knew at the time. So it's hard to say, well, they were real heroes. They took risks. They loved it, and unknowingly they took risks. But that's a very special car. Emerson, we're very fortunate to still have him drive his car from 74. So again, a 50-year anniversary to that. Won 3 races in that particular car and the championship. So special. And then MP4610, Ayrton. Yeah, I mean, I think we all hold him with such high regard in one way or another, and that's very close to our heart.
What happens to an F1 car then when it stops racing? I mean, what's going to happen to this year's car? What's the life of after F1 really? What happens to an F1 car then when it stops racing? I mean, what's going to happen to this year's car? What's the life of after F1 really?
It's harder nowadays because the cars are just so complex. What do you do with them? To keep a car going, you need all the ancillaries. You need the engine, you need the electronics, you need the ECUs, and so on and so forth. For a more current car, you need all the battery boxes, etc., and that's where it falls over. the supply just isn't there. So I think these cars will actually become very rare to run in time to come because they're just too complex. Whereas a non-complex car to that degree, they can sit for a little while. The ECUs are delicate. Over time they will break down. But generally speaking, because we're fortunate in terms of we have all the drawings and all the technical availability to it, we can reproduce. So that's not a problem.
Maybe a bit of a trivial question, but we talked about your favourite cars. McLaren also known for some amazing liveries. Obviously, you've got chrome, we've got the red and white, we've got the special liveries like the Triple Crown last year. Like, is there one for you, livery-wise, that you've always loved?
I liked our red and white. I liked the West. I liked the Vodafone because they were just so simplistic, you know. And it was an instant you could tell it's a McLaren car. Obviously, since then we had such a barren period, and there's some awful liveries. And you know, let's not under-dramatise it. They were just very, very poor. But obviously, the step up to how you find a sponsor or a backer. Gone are the days where you got one major sponsor support. You know, that happened in many years ago, decades ago. But now it's a case of, you know, getting small sponsors on there. And how do you make that look pretty? You know, it must be a challenging job for the graphic guys. But I think our car looks really quite nice now. I like the Papaya. It genuinely represents McLaren, and anyone can ask, you know, identify that car now and a team, which they could do all those years ago with red and whites, with West, with Vodafone. There was a period where we were completely lost, but I think we've now genuinely found our own livery again.
Final question for you. You've worked at McLaren. I think you joined as Alan Prost's mechanic, if I'm right. Sort of, what does the team, what does McLaren mean to you?
Home. Yeah, it means a lot.
Love it. That's a great way to end it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Grab that off before you
Oh, yeah.
spit it. Must be chasing after you. Thank you for that.
That's all for today's show. My thanks go to Indy, Rob, Gary and McLaren for setting it all up. We've got one more day of the Behind the Papaya week, so a fresh interview is going to be dropping in your feeds tomorrow. To make sure you don't miss it, click subscribe on your favourite podcast app and give us a rating while you're there to help the show grow. In the meantime, you can follow us on socials at Pondering Papaya, or you can email the show inbox@ponderingpapaya.com. We'll see you tomorrow.